Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sascha Fahrbach. The Czech and Slovak governments are meeting Tuesday to sign a new cooperation memorandum with talks focused on competitiveness, infrastructure and energy security. Now, the meeting comes as concerns grow in other European capitals about political direction in parts of Central Europe, including rule of law issues and recent protests in Prague. And joining us now is Krzysztof Dębiec, Senior Central Europe Specialist, Center for Eastern Studies. Good to have you with us. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for the invitation and good morning.
So with this meeting between these two governments, there's a lot on the agenda, but practically, does this tell us, is this a deeper alignment with these two countries, or is it just optics? Is it both?
Well, the Czech Republic and Slovakia share some important part of common history, especially in the 20th century. They both formed a common state in 1918. The state was recreated after World War II, and even if the both countries split in 1993, the relations remained more or less close, more on the cultural or people-to-people basis than governmental at the moment. But with time, the governments also became closer. And well, basically since late 1990s, the relationship between the Czech Republic and Slovakia, also on this political basis, was conceived by both sides as absolutely special. And what actually changed that was the government, the regime change in Slovakia in autumn 2023, and we had to wait almost exactly 3 years to witness another intergovernmental consultations and to see both prime minister change since 2023 when last intergovernmental consultations took place.
Right, but I was still curious on how significant this cooperation is. I mean, we often look at this and have this close relationship that we've seen between Prague, between Bratislava, and then also want to get to Hungary. But does this mean in any way that this is a sign things are still close politically, or what does this meeting tell us today, happening on Tuesday?
Well, it's surely a sign that both countries want to establish closer cooperation in Central Europe. But what we've basically seen since the Zoom of Czechoslovakia is that while at certain periods of time, including the last couple of months since the government change in the Czech Republic, the relationship between both countries remained or were called special. In practice, there are at least a couple of more important relationships, or there are a couple of other countries, bigger countries, that are in practice considered strategic. And I mean here especially Germany. But at the same time, we see that both countries are struggling to find some new formula of regional cooperation after the Visegrád format practically ceased to exist on this highest political level. And they, in certain aspects, they tried to establish cooperation in a so-called Slavkov triangle, which includes not only Czech-Slovaks but also Austrians. Here we know that there are certain visible limits. The most important of them is that Austria is a strong opponent of nuclear energy, which is of paramount importance for their Slavkov partners. there were some attempts to re-establish Visegrád cooperation, but we can state with almost certainty that as long as the current government in Budapest or the current Orbán administration is in power, we will not see a major difference in this case. And both countries are more and more trying to use some ad hoc formats and also build bilateral relationship more than some bigger regional cooperation formats. And within this bilateral cooperation, it's basically evident that the Czech Republic and Slovakia, after the recent government change in the Czech Republic, are very close to each other, and not least because the new old prime minister, because Andrej Babiš returned to the office he had before.
Let's talk about Mr. Babiš there for a moment. I want to just ask you there, because we've also seen, we see also with Robert Fico, there is opposition to him, but it's not quite the same if we look at Prague. I want to also look at what's happened the last weekend, 250,000 protesters around Prague. Is Babiš, let's say, how would you assess him? It's a, as you said, return to government. It's a bit fresh. Is he under more pressure now? What's that relationship? What does that tell us on his government role and the public protests we've seen over the weekend?
Well, we need to take into account that if we compare Czech Republic on the one hand and Slovakia or Hungary on the other, that the Czechs have much stronger institutions of civil society, NGOs, public conscience, and of course we live in this bipolar world also within certain countries, and there's a very strong sentiment of those who support the current Babiš government, and a very strong one also when it comes to the oppositions and the electorate of the center right, which is now in the opposition. So what we've basically seen is the manifestation of what of the current opposition, of the manifestations of their strength. But if we look at the polls, we can see that there's no major shift since late September elections in the Czech Republic, and well, the bigger cities, especially Prague, has been traditionally for center-right and for liberals and against populists and against nationalists. So I really doubt whether more than some 10 probably or 5% of those who protested in last year's elections for the current governing government coalition parties. The situation in Slovakia is quite visibly different. The Fico government is after more than 2 years of its fourth government. The support for it is around 50% of, it could probably receive some 50% of the parliamentary mandates it has now. So the situation of Fico is, if you look at the polls, is much worse, and that is results among others from the financial budget consolidation packages, which Fico government tries to push through, and they not only do they have limited effects for the budget deficit, but they discourage voters from voting for the parties that two of the three parties consider themselves traditional left. And
I want to jump in on there, if I may. I do want to ask you. You mentioned Fico, and I want to tie up a recent comment of his. Now, the Prime Minister has warned out of Slovakia that if jumping to Hungary now, if Viktor Orbán loses in just a couple of weeks, that would damage relations. Let's look at that for a moment. I mean, looking at the polls, which you also mentioned, is very close in Hungary right now. Scenario A, what if Orbán does win? Or two, what if he loses? How would that impact this region in Europe?
Well, the independent polls in Hungary, as far as I know, favor the current opposition TISA party to win. And if we stick to that, we will probably see a deterioration of Slovak-Hungarian relations, not least because of the so-called Banesh decrees affair. Current Slovak opposition tried to support Hungarian minority in Slovakia and voiced against to cut themselves, appealed for Slovak government to cut themselves off the so-called Banesh decrees that imposed. That were considered very negative by Hungarian minority, which is around 8% of the population. And Fico wanted to attack its domestic opposition and adopted a law which imposes up to 6 months of prison for contesting the post-World War II order. Of course, it resonated very strongly not only among the Hungarian minority in Slovakia, but also in Hungary itself, where the election campaign is underway. And Péter Magyar, who is the TISA leader, chose probably the strongest words possible. He appealed for Orbán government to dismiss to use all possible diplomatic steps, including expelling Slovakia's ambassador to Budapest. And he promised he would do that should he take power after elections and Slovakia does not withdraw from the controversial law. So that's the scenario number one. And the scenario number two, if Orbán wins, probably we'll see the business as usual scenario, which is Orbán in the as good camarade of both and Fico and probably also some, as they say in Brussels, some bad boys in the European Council meetings. Stopping some aid for Ukraine and
right. Yeah, and those issues are going to be key. We'll still have some weeks to go until that critical election, so we'll analyze it there. But look, thanks so much for all that this morning. Krzysztof Dębiec from the Center for Eastern Studies. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching World Talks. But stay right here on TVP World for more news and commentary. Goodbye.